go into it, and how do you ensure as you go on. Managing in for me is very much like the Formula 1 race. When you're going around the bend, you don't go at full speed. You cut down your speed, you adjust everything to ensure that you take the curve properly, so that when you hit the straight, full, you're absolutely full on the pedal and you're really accelerating out on the out. Okay, so managing in is managing a curve. You have to be very careful as to how you maneuver the curve. If you take it at too much speed, you'll go out of gear. You'll just spin out and you won't be in the race anymore. The first set about managing in is the mindset. You have to slow down and think. You cannot blindly start betting and taking risks. You have to slow down. The whole management team and the board needs to step back and say, develop alternate scenarios. What's the worst which could happen? What's the likely which can happen? What do we need to do? You have to start thinking like that. You cannot go full throttle when you're managing the curve. Second, while you're doing the managing in, a simple rule, always play to your strengths. A lot of companies make the mistake of trying to copy somebody else in the industry and they start playing to their weakness. Somebody says, okay, the other industry or the other competitor is doing this, let's start following that. That doesn't help. The key thing in any turbulence is play to your strengths. Identify a list of strengths that you have as a company, as an individual. What are the top 5, 6 things? Play to your strengths. That's what I would say. Next, when you're managing in, manage your costs. You have to keep costs under control. You have to manage them in a very different way. And fourth, as I mentioned, put the plans. Most optimistic, most pessimistic. It's quite likely that what you will end up with is somewhere in between. But you have to assume the worst if you want to get out of a turbulence. You have to assume the worst. So what's the worst which can happen to the Indian rupee? What's the worst which can happen to our GDP? What's the worst which can happen? Ask that question. Then you'll suddenly find the answers to that in a much sharper manner. Managing in requires value thinking. Why? Most consumers start conserving their cash and their wallets when they're managing in. You have to give a consumer a very good reason. You have to alter the value to the consumer for him to come and buy your brand or your category. Okay. In terms of tactics, some of the mistakes people make, and I will talk about it, they cut quality. Never cut quality. Consumers can actually figure out very quickly that you've cut quality. Okay. So cutting quality is not an answer in managing turbulence. Okay. Improving value is very important. Maintaining quality is very important. The moment you cut quality, consumers notice it, you'll never come back. Okay. Reframe the category and see what you can do, and mix the categories and see what you can do, and I'll give you examples of that. First, focus on quality. This story is from the 70s and 80s. Chocolate prices up, sugar prices up. Kit Kat decided to cut its quality versus Mars. Mars, on the other hand, decided to keep its quality. Over a two-year time frame, the consumers could actually see that the quality of Kit Kat had dropped. Kit Kat never came back to market leadership after that, even 40 years later. Never. A very simple example for a very simple category, which is chocolates. Packaging options. Rethink the cost and the value to the consumer. Here's Vittel, the same bottle, they trimmed down their cost by about 29% as they went through turbulence. No cost is a sacred cost when you're managing turbulence. Every single cost needs to be thought about, whether it's salary, whether it's bonus, whether it's packaging. You have to ask yourself the tough questions on optimizing what you're doing. Signaling price sensibly. If you go out and say sale, 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 consumers don't buy it for you. You have to alter it and talk about value. Everybody in India keeps talking price, but the behavior of the consumer is much more value and much less price. So you have to signal the value which consumers can get out of your category, not price alone. Price alone is not going to win you the war in a turbulent phase. Next, this is happening right now. These are things we thought were Indian sachets, 50 paisa sachet, 1 rupee sachet, 2 rupee sachet. Today you have a €1 yogurt pack in France. You have a $1 ketchup pack in America from Heinz. Everybody is now rethinking the concept of having a fixed price and ensuring that you deliver value to consumers. Okay, this is something which emerging markets have done for the last 25 years. Because of the economic uncertainty and turbulence in the Western world, most categories are going into this format right now. People are not spending on big packs. People are reframing their purchase into dollar packs, euro packs. This is what is happening, and all these companies have benefited from their initiatives. Mixed category. Which other category can I go together with? So here's a detergent category with a fabric brand going together. So who other in the ecosystem, which other player in the ecosystem can you partner with to ensure that both of you benefit? Because you will not be able to spend a lot, he will not be able to spend a lot, but by combining forces, you can ensure that you deliver new value to the consumer. So ask yourself, in your industry, whom can you collaborate with in this turbulent phase? And there are many people out there who have the same problem as you do. Okay? Next, those who are managing in. Managing out requires a very different mindset. You've seen the managing in part, you cut your costs, you've trimmed everything, you altered value to the consumer. Managing out requires a very different philosophy. And long-term winners in managing out invariably invest more in innovation, invest more in advertising, and actually bring in better talent employees to the company. Okay, so while you're managing in, the board and the managing director need to think about, are we cutting our innovation? Are we cutting the spend on advertising? Are we cutting, recruiting great talent? The history of advertising shows that every brand which invests in a recession, in turbulence, invariably gains faster than anybody else. So there's a common notion, especially for finance professionals, to say, let's cut advertising. It's the most visible expenditure. Let's cut innovation. It's the most visible expenditure. But cutting advertising and innovation in a turbulence is like saying you're in an aeroplane with 4 engines, you're flying through turbulence, and then you say as a pilot, okay, let me cut off 2 engines and I'll still fly. Theoretically, you can still fly. You can do that, no problem. But you'll hurt the long-term prosperity of your brand and company. So for me, managing out is about over-investing in innovation and advertising and not cutting it. Get new people to the table. People who have a challenger mindset to say, I like this situation because it's challenging and I believe I can add something to it. The mindset of the employee you have is very important as you go through this phase. Next, you need to support current employees. I mentioned that you cannot have ambiguity and uncertainty. The worst thing in employees is for them to feel insecure. The day a workforce feels insecure, the productivity in the company drops significantly. You cannot let that happen. And the job of a CEO and senior management is to constantly communicate the strategy, constantly communicate what's happening. Employees don't mind uncertainty. They don't mind it. They want to have a clear benchmark as to when it will get over. So if you are standing before your employees, you need to clearly tell them, I think this will last 9 months. By September of this year, we should be okay. Now for 9 months, let's tighten the belt. Let's do this. Then they have great clarity. It's very much like when you go through turbulence. I'm a very nervous flyer, though I fly a lot. I'm a very nervous flyer because my dad passed away in an airline accident in 1993. So I'm a very nervous flyer from that. So every time I get on a flight, I tell my mom I'm on a flight. Every time I get on, I tell my mom I've arrived. When I go through turbulence, I really love pilots who tell me, the turbulence for the next 10 minutes, fasten your seatbelt, we are fine. It gives me peace of mind. I know that I need to hold on for the next 10 minutes. The worst is some airlines. You're going through turbulence, they don't say anything. Then you're wondering if the pilot is awake or asleep or what is he doing at the controls. It's the same philosophy. Employees go through the same thing. They want to know from the leader and from the board, where is the end point? So you have to communicate that. You have to support your employees. And finally, strengths. I keep saying this again and again. Whenever you're in turbulence, whether as an individual or a family or society or a company, play to your strengths. Today, India is going through turbulence. If we play to our strengths, we'll win. Today, companies go through turbulence. You play to your strengths, you'll win. Tomorrow, as an individual, you'll go through turbulence. Play to your strengths, you'll win. Do not play to your weakness or your opposition's strength. So in summary, I would say managing turbulence today at a national level, international level, is an absolute imperative. You cannot get away from it. Okay? The GDP at 6.9, the volatility of the rupee, the present state of the Sensex demands that we rethink our business principles, put down the most optimistic scenario for the future, the most pessimistic scenario for the future, assume the worst. When you assume the worst, anything else will be better than what you assume. You have to plan for the worst and actually hope for the best. And that's the kind of planning which I'd want us to do. As you manage in, you need to cut your costs, you need to trim your speed, you need to ensure that you're playing to your strengths. You need to alter value to the consumers, you need to reframe categories, you need to ask people in your ecosystem whether they can help you. Both of you can work together as you manage in. When you manage out, you need to invest in innovation, you need to invest in advertising, you need to invest in your current employees. The state and health of the mind of your current employee is very important if you want to win. Okay, so that's all I have to say, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time and attention.